Really interesting fight at middleweight, and I'm crossing my fingers this one's at middleweight between a couple of 5-5 fighters. We have Eryk Anders taking on Darren Stewart, and I say 5-5 because they're both 5-5 in the UFC. Now, Darren Stewart has the no contest, the accidental headbutt in his debut against Francimar Barros that was deemed, of course, accidental, overturned to a no contest. Darren Stewart would go on to lose 3 fights. He was on the chopping block. And then he came back like a phoenix rising, and he's looked pretty good since. Now, for Darren Stewart, I got to get this out of the way. Normally, I kind of tiptoe and pitter-patter around some of these things. You look at the fights that he had since the 3-fight losing streak. So he lost to Barros in the rematch. He lost to Carl Roberson. He lost to Julian Marquez. Very fun fight if you want to go back and watch that one. Beats Eryk Spicely. Beats Charles Bird. Loses split decision to Edmund Shabazian. Probably should have won it. Beats Bavon Lewis, looks good. Beats Jourdain Win by split decision. He beat him. He beat him. Loses to Bartosz Fabinski 2020. Beats Maki Pitolo, loses split decision to Kevin Holland. The one real blemish that I have on Darren Stewart's record, because I look at this, all right, those 3 losses in a row, and they kind of ended in 2017, I forget about them a little bit. You know, I kind of forget about them, because he's looked good since against varying levels of competition. The problem I have, so they were supposed to have UFC London. That was going to be Woodley and Leon Edwards. And then the card got shifted around due to COVID. The one fight that they saved off that card, and they put it on Cage Warriors 113, was Darren Stewart, Bartosz Fabinski. They put it in the main event. Paddy Pimblett was on that card. We did previews for that. And we were so high on Darren Stewart to beat Bartosz. Because what does Bartosz do? Has great judo, poor cardio. Darren Stewart, pretty good wrestler, pretty good submissions. Pretty good striker. Like, he's decent all around, and his cardio is not terrible. Bartosz Fabinski mopped the effing floor with that guy. And Bartosz, not the biggest guy for middleweight. Like, really, he's kind of a blown-up welterweight.
He is.
What middleweight isn't? But really, he's a blown-up welterweight. So I worry about that fight a lot. Now, he came back. He had the fight against Maki Pitolo and looked amazing. Was it a little bit too much too soon for Pitolo? I don't know. But Darren Stewart looked pretty good. And then he fought Kevin Holland in a fight where, listen, Holland won the first 2 rounds. I know it was a split. Holland won the first 2, and Stewart ended strong in the 3rd round.
Did.
So for me, you look at that fight, Darren Stewart, all right, so be it. Weight, not really the biggest issue. I said that from the jump, and I crossed my fingers. Eryk Anders was supposed to fight back in November. Weighed in at 187.5 to fight Antonio Hoyo. So high on Eryk Anders in that fight. People called us donkeys. So high on him. So he weighs in, misses weight. They do the face-offs. And then the next day, Eryk Anders off the card. Weight-cutting issues after the fact, so on and so forth. And he had to be taken to the hospital. Now, was it all that bad? Probably not. Have I gone on Instagram and looked at Eryk Anders? He looks Shred City, and he looks in really good shape coming into this one. Pictures from the last week. But man, the weight's been an issue before, and the trouble is with Eryk Anders, you know, he's had fights at 205. The Santos fight was on short notice, and he got absolutely steamrolled. But after that, he fought Khalil Roundtree in 2019. Well, he got steamrolled by Bangkok-ready Khalil. Then he fought Vinicius Moreira, arguably one of the worst fighters we've ever seen in the UFC, and he knocks him out in the first round, moves back to 85, beats Gerald Meerschaert by split, and loses to Krzysztof Jotko in a fight where, yeah, Eryk Anders had the control time, but every time that fight was on the feet, Jotko teed off.
And that's the real thing with Eryk Anders. He's a good grappler, but he thinks he's a striker, and we talk about this a lot. People who know what they're good at. I don't think Eryk Anders knows what he's good at. I think he has all the tools to beat someone like Darren Stewart. I just don't think he realizes he has all the tools to beat someone like Darren Stewart. Because Eryk Anders, we talk about the striking. He has good power. He's a tricky southpaw. He's got decent boxing. He's good on the ground, though, and he actually competes in jiu-jitsu tournaments all the time. It's more of what he focuses his time on than his actual striking training.
Eryk Anders has a purple belt. Eryk Anders has a brown belt. Darren Stewart has a purple belt. Eryk Anders, leveling up.
Exactly, and you would think that would be his easiest path to victory in this fight. We've seen Darren Stewart struggle with grapplers, and Eryk Anders is going to be the bigger fighter in this fight. You talk about the weight misses. He's a guy who fought at 205 and was a fairly big light heavyweight. It's kind of wild to me that he even wants to fight at 185, to be completely honest, because I do think that we do see a diminished version of Eryk Anders down at the weight class. And Darren Stewart, if Eryk Anders tries to fight Darren Stewart like he fought Krzysztof Jotko, where it is very control heavy, very clinch heavy, he might be able to eke out a decision. But the issue is, and I think it's an issue that we've been starting to see after the Thiago Santos fight, he's not that comfortable on his feet, and you can out-volume a guy like Eryk Anders. He does have that really high stance, and if you're a guy like Khalil Roundtree, who we saw throw those big looping shots around his guard, you can connect on Eryk Anders' chin, and Darren Stewart has absurd hand speed and really good power, and I would argue his boxing technique, at least, is far better than Khalil Roundtree's. He's a guy who does go to the body, he's a guy who goes to the head, he's got good elbows on the inside, too. That's one thing I like about Darren Stewart. He makes guys pay for their takedown attempts. We saw that a lot in the Jourdain Witt fight, because he went for 1,000 takedown attempts in that fight, and that fight really was a story of Witt went for a bunch of takedown attempts, didn't really do anything with them, but when the fight was on the feet, Darren Stewart was teeing off
Just
on him.
like when Jourdain Witt fought Antonio Hoyo.
Exactly, it's really a story for old Jourdain Witt, but I do like the game of Darren Stewart, especially against a guy like Eryk Anders, because Anders is there to be hit, and he's not the best wrestler in the world. If he is able to get the fight to the mat, then yes, he can get some effective ground and pound and a little bit of grappling off, but in my mind, if Darren Stewart can defend a few takedowns early on, I think he's got better cardio than Eryk Anders. I think he's got better boxing technique than Eryk Anders. And if Eryk Anders finds himself in one of those slugfests in the middle of the cage, I can see him getting dropped sooner rather than later.
Matt, wow. I mean, Eryk Anders, he switched things up. He's trained out of Fight Ready MMA in Arizona. And I think that's a good camp change. I mean, he's been a guy out of SBG, and really most of his career he's been out of SBG, and now he's really made that camp switch here lately. I think it's a good move for him, so we'll see how that plays out for Anders. Like you said, I mean, he has good wrestling. If you look at the stats, we got a decent enough sample size for both of these guys. Great takedown defense from Eryk Anders. He can really kind of force the fight wherever it needs to be. You want a great Eryk Anders fight, go watch him fight Tim Williams. Pride Never Die. If you want to see a kick like that. It was insane. I have a tough time with this one. Again, the weight's a bit of an issue for me. Darren Stewart, as odd as it might sound, a little bit more of a consistent fighter. But if you like Eryk Anders, you love that Bartosz-Fabinski fight. If you like Darren Stewart, you like the Maki Pitolo fight. So there's a tale of two different fighters. To me, this one's a bit of a tricky one. 1,011 votes on Tapology. 77% going with Stewart, 74% by decision. If we look at the odds for this one, Anders opened to plus 162. He's now plus 150. For Darren Stewart, open to minus 196. He's now minus 182. So the money's on Stewart. The fans are with Stewart. I have a bit of a tough time with this one. I will ever so slightly go with Darren Stewart here.
I just think he's the more active striker out of the two. And again, I know I kind of made it sound like he'd be able to clip Anders with something big and maybe drop him, but just his overall work rate is a little bit higher. And Eryk Anders is a guy who can kind of be caught looking in the mirror where he's not the one initiating a lot of the offense, he's just reacting to it. And if you're on the back foot against Darren Stewart, he's going to land something big eventually. And Eryk Anders has little to no head movement. And the good thing about Darren Stewart is he does do a good job of at least peekabooing in and out, and he can catch you with a hook on the way in. So I like Darren Stewart in this fight.
Matt, both of us going with England's the dentist. Darren Stewart, really looking forward to this fight, and it's a great card. Cirkunov, Spann in the co-main event, and in the main event, we're talking Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it.